and welcome to The Exchange, and to all of you watching online, thanks for coming out. Tonight we're talking about food, which it turns out is really popular. We're surrounded here by a show about food. It's called Food for Thought. It took us 10 years to realize that in the gallery we should open up to an open call show about food. We got a lot of work. There are 80 pieces here by people from 7 Pennsylvania counties, and there are another 20 pieces across the river at Rohrbox because we got a lot of artwork. It turns out people really like not only to think about food and to eat food, but to paint food and photograph food and draw food and otherwise depict it. We also like to talk about food. And I'd like to put in a pitch, since I have the floor right now, for bread. Bread, I think, is the staff of life. When I was a kid, I ate a lot of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. My mother bought bread. I made peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. In high school, we were allowed to go through the hot lunch line once. I was a growing boy. I was hungry. So I'd make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich every day after lunch. I went through college. I ate a lot more peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. And after college, I hit the road, and I went traveling around the US. It is actually possible to make oneself a peanut butter and jelly sandwich while driving down an interstate. You can't do that with fried chicken or a hamburger. At some point, someone gave me some sourdough starter. I thought, this is interesting. So I got it started, and I was spending time, this is now in the late 1980s, I spent time on a cattle ranch in Montana. I was living with the patriarch on the ranch. His son and daughter, who were doing most of the work at that point, lived a couple miles away, still on the same ranch. But it was part of my job in living there was to feed Bob. He was living by himself after his wife had passed, and he ate a lot of hot dogs. And his family said to me, if you can get him to eat any real food, we will appreciate that. So I made the sourdough starter. I started baking bread and making pancakes, and it was really fun. So when I ended up in Pennsylvania a few years later living here, every now and then I would make something relatively ambitious. But what really started me on bread was Bloomin' Bagels here on Main Street in Bloomsburg. They opened in the early 1990s, not long after we'd moved here. My wife started buying all these bagels, which of course were delicious, but they're really expensive. And I thought, we can't afford this, and I started baking bread pretty regularly. And then one day I went to see our neighbors. They were around the corner. They were among the closer neighbors, still a mile and a half away since we lived out in the country at that point. Florence and LaRue were in their late 80s. And I went over there one day, and Florence, age 89, was making bread. And there were 8 loaves of bread rising on her counter in bread pans. And I thought, if she can do that, I can do that. And I have made all of our family's bread ever since. I bake every few weeks. I actually have 7 bread pans. There were 4 of one size, 2 of another size, 1 of another. They all fit in the oven. I bake bread, I freeze bread, and my children, who are now grown and out of the house, are not really happy with store-bought bread because they grew up with mine, which is, I think, just an enormous pleasure. I'm really thrilled that I passed on to them the idea that bread should be something that you really take seriously. It is, in fact, the staff of life. So, Bob Walz, if you would like to come up and open for the evening with your thoughts on food.
Good evening. My name is Bob Walz, and this is a fortunate thing for me. This is a poem I wrote many a year ago, at least 40 years ago, gone through many transitions. It's a short poem, it's satirical, and it's appropriate to our season because it is called Thanksgiving. And I shall commence reading it now. I am sorry for cutting off your head. Our garnished table shall be your last and only resting bed. Our bloated stomachs, your soul's quick remembrance. Life, alas, feeds on death. Yet for you I pray this saving grace may offer a taste of sweet solace for the humbling severance of your life and meaningfulness. Allow me to serve my guests the meat of your matter, as you give thanks for the justice laid out on this platter. Death, alas, feeds on life. And while I always see agonizingly the eternal revolving axeman's blade, and tremble in my mind's solitary stockade, you at least feed these words. But I will make an awkward entree, an ultimately absurd cruciform for the indifferent blindness of the deaf, dumb, and thoughtless worm. And that's it.
That is definitely very appropriate to this season. I would offer some of this around, but I just have the one. So a few years ago, 10 years ago now, actually, we had a guest in the house over the summer, a French exchange student who came here. Our daughter had gone to Nantes to live with her family for a few weeks, and then Agathe came here. Maya probably ate better, but we wanted to give Agathe the full range of American food. So on her second night here, we went to a baseball game up in Williamsport, and she had fried chicken and hot dogs and all the rest. The thing that Agathe discovered in America that she had never seen before was peanut butter. She loved it. I eat a peanut butter and jelly sandwich almost every single day, on my bread, of course. Agathe was just as happy to have peanut butter every day for lunch. When she went home on the plane, in her suitcase, 4 big jars of peanut butter that she could share with her family. She went home very happy. We had a delightful time with her. She was just the best guest. Everything that we set in front of her to eat, she enjoyed. We went to museums. She read every plaque. She was just really interested in being here. And she really got an American experience, except for one thing. We realized a couple days after she left, we'd never gotten her to a pizza place. The most American food there is. I don't know how we had missed that. In any event, here's to Agathe. I hope she comes back at some point and can taste some of our pizza. Genevieve, would you like to come and read, please?
Okay. I hope everybody will understand me. I have an accent. If you have noticed before, if you don't know me, I have an accent. So I speak French normally. So this story, I wrote a few stories about my childhood during the World War II. And there are a couple of them that have, it's about food, okay? So here is one. The pig. My grandmother was worrying about the pig. It was the pig saved from being taken by some Germans in the summer. Let me see it like this. It's better. I know, my voice is big enough. I know you can, loud enough. I'm sure you can understand. At that time, my cousin and I were told to go to the barn, which stood away from the house, and contrary to what always insisted upon, to be as rambunctious and loud as we could be. It is terrible. The purpose of our boisterous play was to cover up the of the pig living in the pen at the far left corner of the barn. A German patrol had been seen in the village raiding comestible, especially porcine, and was heading our way. Our rowdiness succeeded, for after checking the stable, where they only encountered one old cow, they left, probably happy to escape from the cacophony coming out of the barn. My grandfather was a wheelwright and a carpenter. He had built the family house in 1914 on top of a hill overlooking the village. At that time, 1914, he witnessed the German passing, invading his country despite Belgium's neutrality. Being of modest means, some livestock and a garden were a necessity in order to nourish the family. As all dwellings, mostly farms in the region where they lived in the south of Belgium, the house was built to host human and beast under the same roof. It was divided in two by a corridor in which a door gave access from the living quarters to a barn and a small stable. And it is in that barn that the pig, slaughtered in late fall, was preserved in salt in a large tub, and on which some empty grain jute bags had been laid on top to prevent dust finding its way in. It was the same pig my grandmother was thinking about. It was December 1944. Belgium had been liberated from German occupation in September. But in the middle of December, in a desperate effort to regain control, German troops had pushed back in advance of our American liberators. Some of these invaders were now occupying the house, which was at that time only about 15 kilometers, about 8 miles, from the front, where the two armies were confronting each other in what became known as the Battle of the Bulge. Because of the strategic location of my grandparents' house, from which they could survey the region for kilometers around, the Germans had established a headquarters, with the officer sharing the bedrooms, while the subordinates bunked on straw bales in the barn. A piece of the roof was cut off and a light anti-aircraft cannon installed in. I will get to the food at the end, don't worry about it. So a piece of the roof was cut off and a light anti-aircraft cannon installed in the attic. My grandmother, my two aunts, and my cousin who lived with her had been ordered to leave the house. My aunts and cousin left for the village, but at the peril of her life, my grandmother refused to go and was escorted to the dark and humid cellar. However, the winter of 1944 was snowy and very cold, and after a few hours, she was led back to the kitchen on the orders of a senior officer who happened to be a physician. She was instructed to sit and remain seated in her wicker chair near the black kitchen stove, the only heat provided in the entire house. Being remote from the village, no electric line had reached the house. The water came from the artesian well a few feet away from the front door, or was fetched from the natural spring in a dark corner of the cellar. The bathroom facility was in an outhouse behind the detached barn, but the stable was also commonly used on snowy and winter days. For 2 weeks, sitting in her chair in the space allotted to her, with the house shaking from the firing of the cannon in the attic and from the bomb and artillery shells falling around the house, fortunately missing their target, my grandmother pray, wonder about the safety and whereabouts of my aunts and cousin, and wonder about the pig. What was some of it part of the meager meal simmering on the stove? Already all the chicken, even the old and tough hens, had gone the way to the pot. The old cow had been spared, providing the little milk she could give, reserved only for the officers. As fast, if not faster, as they came, the Germans left, or rather fled, defeated by the power and determination of the American and English armies. Artillery shells were still falling around the house when my grandmother, now free to move around, went to the barn. Sweeping the straw that had been piled up over the jute bags over the salting tub, probably the remain of a soldier bedding, and pushing the bags away, she lifted the cover to find, against all expectation, that the pig had survived. Not a morsel was missing. She laughed and considered this as her own victory. She had not cooked, nor had a decent meal for more than 2 weeks, so she picked up a slab of bacon to make a matouffé, a regional dish often eaten for breakfast or a main meal when you did not have time to cook, such as on laundry days. As if lured by the smell of the cooking bacon filling the kitchen, my aunt and cousin came in rejoicing to be together again. They had survived. The house was still standing, despite the hole in the roof, some broken windows, and cracks in the walls. The matouffé, that's a dish, the matouffé was already on the table when an explosion shattered the window closer to the table, spraying glass all over the kitchen. An artillery shell had fallen closer to the house than any previous one, fortunately missing it, but in a testament to the still closeness of the battlefield. Nobody was hurt, but the matouffé was sprinkled with small pieces of glass. While my aunts fetched brooms and dustmen, unperturbed, my grandmother cut thick slices of bacon and started another matouffé. After all, what was a broken window after what they all had gone through? Besides, there was plenty of bacon in the salting tub. So the matouffé, I'm going to give it, you probably don't know what it is. It's like an omelette, if you want, a thick omelette, but it has flour in it also. And it's called matouffé because in French, in the old French, it would have been something to kill the hunger, matouffé, mat faim in French, okay? And I have the recipe here if you want me to read the recipe. And it's made with eggs, bacon, little flour, and it's kind of rather thick, when it comes out. And it's interesting to know that it is a dish, something that it has made for years. I can even find it in books, in French books from Rabelais in 1500. So it comes from a way back. And it's made in different regions. I'm from Belgium, that is the south of Belgium, this one. But in France, in different regions, they have the same, with the same name, a little pronounced differently or spelled differently. But the mountain area, like in Savoie, in the Alps, they add cheese with it. It's almost like a quiche, It's almost like a quiche Lorraine. But the flour is with the eggs. You see what I mean? There is no crust. Something that I was thinking is that it is interesting. It's something like to kill your hunger, not like that's it. But you have that not only in the French, in France or the French countries. You have that also in different civilizations, something like that, that it's made to kill your hunger. Like the Indians, the North American Indians have the pemmican. Do you know what is the pemmican? It's dry meat from buffalo, deer, or elk, whatever that hunt, that is dried and pulverized, and then they mix that with tallow. The tallow is a render fat from the animal. And then they mix that also with fruit, berries, like blueberries, huckleberries, cherries, whatever, and dried cherries. And then they made a little pellet, if you want, with that. And so they could take that when they were hunting. They didn't need to start making food. That was very substantial, they could eat. In South America, they have something similar also in Argentina. Other culture, Argentina and Uruguay, they have a lot of beef, okay? And they have what they call matambre. It is mata hambre, kill hunger, okay? And it's the same, but there it's prepared with beef. It's made with flank steak, but originally it was made with little muscles that is between the skin and the rib cage. It's very fine, very fine. And then they make a hole with that skin, that muscle, and inside they put ham, vegetables, hard-boiled eggs, herbs, and they hold this, and then they roast it, and then it's sliced very, very, very thin. And and that can be served at cold or warm. But you see, you have that. I have not investigated on the other continents or countries, so I'm sure there will be these things existed some other places, to just have something to sustain you when you were hunting or somewhere else. Now we go to the McDonald's here. Okay. Okay, well, that's it. Unless you want another story, I don't know. Thank you.
So, as Genevieve just said, we don't always eat because we have to. There are things that we just eat because they make us feel good, at least at the beginning. They say you just can't eat one, and you keep eating, and you keep eating. I know at least some of the people here have been to parades in this area. And we took our children, starting when they were very small, to the Millville Parade. The Millville 4th of July Parade, it's vast. It goes on for hours. And there are all these floats going by, and they're all throwing candy. So by the time we would go home, the children would have bags, like briefcases, steamer trunks filled with candy. And at home, I will admit that it took me quite a while to relax as a parent. And at the beginning, I was very rigid about a lot of things. And I would see all this candy at home and that they were eating. And I was like, not so much. You have one piece now. One year, I decided that to eliminate that stress, that ongoing stress with all of this candy in the house, I told the children when we went to the parade, you can have as much candy as you want right here. You can eat it all on the street, as much as you would like. You can't take any home. And of course, what I was thinking, it was the baby bird thing. They say that if a baby bird eats something that makes it sick, it won't ever eat it again. My hope was that they would eat so much candy at the Millville Parade that day, they would never want any again. And that year, the parade was just this much too short. And they didn't eat quite enough. I tried. All right, Marguerite, would you like to come?
I love how the segue really goes well into what I'm going to be talking about next. My favorite food is coffee. And I have a series of poems about coffee. And what I love most about it, after hearing some of you share just now, is the process, what it means, the moderation or ritual of it. And what coffee means for me stems back to when I was a kid. I mean, my parents would make coffee every morning. That smell is just a part of me. And now it's part of my daily ritual, grinding the beans, doing the air press, doing a slow process before I do my journal in the morning. And I just have the one cup. When you have that process and it's part of your ritual and you enjoy that slowly, I feel like one is enough, at least for me. And I like it black, nothing in it. I just want the coffee. So, that being said, my poems express what it means to me and what I've learned from it and how I've learned to enjoy it mindfully over time. So these poems were actually, it tells a story from 2021 to 2023. And you'll see how I've changed. The first one is called Coffee, Coffee, Coffee. Too hot, too rushed, it burned my tongue for weeks. How embarrassing. Then it spilled all over my favorite blouse, so I had to throw it out. Too slow, too cold. I was busy and distracted, so it went cold. I have to stomach what's left for me now. I've done it before. I know how it'll taste, but it's not good. Perhaps if I reheat it again, it'll be good again. Oh, but when it's right, it's deep and dark, bold and full, smooth and exciting, comforting, steamy warmth on my tongue. But it must be enjoyed mindfully to feel the satisfaction and pleasure made just for me. It'll be there morning after morning, delicious. Filter. Ground fresh, fragrant beans before you brew. This is something I forgot once to do. Once they're ground, place them in the filter so the hot water can pass through, transmuting into a lovely brew. Don't forget next time. Don't pass by the beginning steps to ensure it's strong and ready for you. Otherwise, it's slightly brown water made for the drain. These are all true things that have happened. Anyway, mug memories. You're my person, good vibes, home. Stay wild, moonchild. Phantom, Hogwarts, and Poe. My name inscribed with roses. All these mugs made just for me. Nana passed down delicate teacups with painted flowers and laced with gold. They invite ritual and daily reflection of celebrated memory. Memories of espresso shots at 17, blueberry coffee with 2 straws before Shakespearean signs. It reminds me of freedom, playfulness, and fun. That ruby thermos accompanied me along my journey into adulthood. Alone or shared, I've always had it next to me, even when I didn't see. Have courage and hold me like a mug. Please do not spill me. Instead, hold me with both hands, breathe in my aroma, and fog up your glasses. I may seem senseless, and maybe that was true, but we all need to be held, don't you? Stain. Coffee stains are sometimes used for art's sake to color or age, but most often it's earned by carelessness or accident all over your shirt on the first day of work. Spills require immediate action. Rinse quickly, then life goes on once the water dries. Spills that sit, on the other hand, seep deep within and require more work to lift. I suppose you could throw it all away, or never let it touch your lips again, but that's life laced with bitterness. I'd rather take the risk and take it slow, enjoying each temporary pleasure in ritual. It's worth the risk, regardless of stain, burn, or cost. Even when it's right, it'll be paid for in loss. Wait for the bloom. His love for coffee matches mine. a morning ritual we now share. He's more skilled in a slower brewing process that I've learned to observe with curiosity. Each step is completed with great care. There's no rush here, as I had done before, with careless oversight of the proper grind, coarse or fine. He waits patiently while it blooms, which takes an additional minute or two. Then with gentle press, his tenderness avoids the mess. No more pushing for the result and settling for pretty good. I tried French press years ago and gave up quickly after mouthfuls of grounds. Now I start from scratch with new instructions and room for refinement of taste, strength, and temperature. Our rituals by hand both honor the craft. But now I understand greater care creates a better cup. In a mug just for me with natural ease. There's magic in the making. Thank you.
So I'm sure a lot of us have memories of the things that we ate with our parents and our grandparents, maybe even great-grandparents. My mother's mother, when I went to stay with her overnight when I was a boy, there were certain treats. So she had a seltzer bottle, the old-fashioned kind that had one of those cartridges on top so it would make the seltzer right there. And she would put that in some orange juice, which when I was 6 and 7 years old, that was just really cool. And she always had Batampta dill pickles, really delicious New York Jewish dill pickles. And the first time I ever had rice checks was at her house. So, these are things that I remember. My father's mother was also not a great chef, but there were a few things that she made really well. And one of them was apple pie. She used Flako crust. It was just nothing fancy at all. But the secret, she said, was always using at least 2 different kinds of apples, one a little sweeter, one a little tartar. And her apple pies, they're the best the world has ever known. My father remembers when he was a boy, at that point my grandmother was a little bit more, energetic as a cook, and she would make angel food cake, these big, fluffy, bright white angel food cakes. And my father would take a giant slab of one of those and squash it down about to the size of a chickpea and pop it in his mouth and swallow it. This did not make her happy. Now, my father would say to her, but Mom, you always say that if there's something that I don't like, I should just mix it with something I do, and it all goes to the same place. Well, it's the same with the angel food cake. It all goes to the same place. Never worked. Bob?
Oh, hello, everybody. I'm Bob. I'm a photographer, traveler, and I have a certain passion for food. I literally and figuratively grew up in a commercial kitchen, as my father was a French trained chef. So I have an affinity for food and travel. And sometimes, when I've traveled, I've experienced some very unusual things when dining. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about those things that I've experienced through my travels. When I was a lot younger, 40-some years ago, I did the traditional European backpacking trip. And I found myself on the left bank, football field away from Notre Dame. And I'm exploring, looking for something to eat. And I find this wonderful little bistro. And of course, I have no language skills. And I wander in and I look at the menu and can't read anything on it. The waiter is not, in true French sense, especially helpful. So I go ahead and order. And, I'm presented with this wonderful dish. And I start to eat, and it's interesting. It's chewy. I'm not really quite sure what it is. It's palatable, and I'm eating it. And I said, okay, I might not order this all the time, but this is interesting. And then I, come to find out that I was eating beef tripe, which tripe is, cow stomach, like that. So that was my first experience at eating things, unusually. A couple years later, I found myself backpacking again across Asia, and I'm in Hong Kong. And obviously, if you like Chinese food, that's a wonderful place to be. So again, I'm out exploring in the evening, all the food stalls, what have you. And again, I don't know Chinese. I come across this food stall. The smells are, intoxicating there. And I proceed to point at a dish. And then I received the dish and started eating it, and it was flavored with wonderful sense of ginger and garlic and soy sauce. It was a little fishy and a little crunchy at the same time. And again, I thought, well, this would take an acquired taste to eat this on a routine basis like that. And again, upon some further research, I had found out that I was eating some wonderful, like salted eel, that evening. And of course, eel's really not maybe too exotic. They used to have it here in the Susquehanna River years ago, all the time. Then my wandering took me to South Africa, and I again was actually with my wife this time, and we go to a restaurant, and I'm intrigued with what is called the daily special, and I should have known by now, maybe perhaps not to pay attention to said specials, and it was a daily special of game carpaccio. And if you're familiar with what carpaccio is very thinly sliced meat, often a red meat, sometimes fish, but often a red meat that's raw, sliced very thinly, a little bit of salt, a little bit of pepper, perhaps a squeeze of lemon. Done correctly, it's very eloquent. So I said, oh, I like carpaccio. Let me order this. It's game, something I've never had before. So I proceeded to order the dish, and it came. And it was a red meat. It was a little on the strong side. And I, proceeded to eat it, and, I enjoyed it, my meal. And, at the end of the evening, since, there wasn't as much of a language barrier this time, I asked the waiter just what was that wild game I had, this evening. And he proceeded to tell me that it was zebra. Said, interesting, zebra. Okay. So I thought, well, maybe I'll never be able to go to a zoo again after eating something like that. So then my wanderings eventually took me a little bit further north in Africa to Morocco, again with my wife in tow. And we're wandering around, again, some more food stalls, and a gentleman waves me in, and we sit down at a cafe, and we had some sweet tea. And then after that, he says, oh, I must try this. I must try this. You've never tried this before. And he presented me with a dairy product that was white, cream colored, in a tall, thin glass like that, and said that, oh, you must drink this. This is very good for you. And I said, okay, sure. At this point, I've certainly tried enough strange things in my life. And so I, proceeded, to drink, this milk that he had given me. And I drank the milk, and it was very interesting. It was about the thickness of half and half milk, half cream. But it was a bit salty, too. It had a little bit of a salty texture to it. And I proceeded to ask him, well, what kind of milk is this? You know, I mean, nowadays we have almond milk, we have oat milk, soy milk, who knows what kind of milk. But he proceeded to tell me that it was camel milk, which is interesting. I don't necessarily think you'll find that in your Wise Market here locally. And to finish up, one more story here. If you find yourself going to the ancient ruins of Machu Picchu, you have to travel through the city of Cusco to get there. Cusco is a wonderful city, lots of wonderful architecture, history. They have a wonderful, incredible museum there. And in their museum, they have an open courtyard, and in the courtyard, they have a very modern restaurant there. Wonderful glass, modern accoutrements there, what have you. So again, my wife in tow with me. We're there in Cusco on our way to Machu Picchu. So we decided to dine in this very, very nice restaurant. So we're in the restaurant and, looking at the menu. The waiter comes over, and I'm always looking for something, obviously, something interesting to eat. And I asked him, I said, well, a suggestion, I'm in Peru here. What should I eat? He says, oh, you must have our national dish, koi. I said, koi? I've never heard of koi. I said, wow, sounds maybe like perhaps a type of bird like that. So I said, certainly, bring me koi. And we have our dinner, and I have the koi, and it's fairly reminiscent of like a bit of a fatty, skinny chicken of sorts. I'm eating it. It tastes perfectly fine. I'm eating it. And again, I seem to ask these questions at the wrong time to find out what exactly koi is. And I proceeded to be told that koi is actually guinea pig. So guinea pig, yes. So I couldn't help but thinking that perhaps I was eating someone's pet. I guess the moral of the story is, certainly is to travel and is to certainly experience new and exotic foods, but perhaps sometimes, use an interpreter before you order. Thank you.
So as you can tell, I'm full. I've been eating all night, but I'm done. But I just want to say, Bob, actually, that was an excellent segue into how I'd like to wrap this up on the subject of food and diversity. The area that we live in central Pennsylvania, we may not think of it as an especially diverse area, but when we first moved here, when Sarah and I first came here more than 30 years ago, there were two experiences that we had that sort of took us back. One was at Wise here in Bloomsburg. Before we moved here, we had started making our own hummus, grinding up the chickpeas, and we liked eating it with pita bread. And we came down to Wise one day, and we're looking at all the bread, and we couldn't find the pita. And there's a kid stocking bread on the shelves, and we said to this boy, excuse me, can you help us find the pita? He's like, what? Pita bread. It's like, pocket bread. He'd never heard of it. 30 years later, you can be very sure that if you went to Wise and you asked the kid stocking bread, he'd know exactly where to point you to. Things have changed here as more and more people came in. The other experience was at the Super Duper. This was the little independent grocery store out on Route 442 on the way towards Muncie. We went out there also 30 some odd years ago. We didn't live far. And we wanted some spaghetti or rotini or something like that, and we're walking up and down trying to find the pasta aisle. It was a while before we realized that what we should have been looking for on the big sign was macaroni. Right, okay. Things have changed in this area. Now on Main Street in Bloomsburg, we have a really wonderful Indian restaurant. We have a Thai restaurant around the corner. There's another Thai restaurant coming in on Main Street. The world is coming here. And that's actually a really, really good thing. The experience that we have out eating in the world, even at the Bloomsburg Fair, there are all kinds of new things that have come in, and our experience here getting to eat has been broadened because more of it is coming here. That diversity, it means that we have more fun and more enjoyment while we're eating, and it makes us a stronger community. Part of what these evenings of storytelling are about is sharing the diversity of our own experience, the experience that is homegrown here and the experience that has come in from outside. It's what makes this a better place all the time. So I thank you all very much for sharing your stories tonight, and we'll look forward to sharing more with you in the future. Thank you much.